Welcome to a teaser for Stacking Choices, Framing Effects on Framing, a project I'm running together with Ingrid Rohde. In this project, we study what we believe is a very common but understudied type of choice situation. We often study settings where we ask you, do you want to have A or B, or do you want A or not? But in many settings, you have many separate options that you can either accept or reject, but they together determine a relevant final allocation. It can be for budgetary reasons. If you buy a lot of A, you have less budget left to buy B, so they influence each other. It can be because of hedging. Accepting a hedge in B might be very attractive if you have exposed yourself to a risk by accepting A, for example, or in our actual project, because of the interaction of time and risk preferences. It can also be because of taste. So let's look at an example of that. Say you come to a supermarket and you see strawberries and cherries and plums. You could buy all of these, and it's in a sense a separate option: buying strawberries, buying plums, buying cherries. But of course it influences each other because you can only eat so much fruit in a particular time. So if you buy the strawberries, you might forego on the cherries and the plums, or maybe you buy two types, but not all three. So there's an interaction in that way. Yet these are separate choices. And we think this choice situation is interesting because it allows for various framing effects which might interact. One way in which these choices can be framed is by presenting them either separately. So first I ask you, do you want strawberries, yes or no? Then cherries, yes or no? Plums, yes or no? Or jointly, presenting you with all three options you have at the same time and asking you to say yes or no to each of them. So this joint or separate evaluation, something that it's been studied before, for example, in lotteries, we have in this type of setting. But at the same time, we can vary other things. One thing we could vary is the order. In this case would be what is presented on the left, and of course, especially in separate evaluation, what is presented first or last. We can also change the default. So perhaps the default is in fact that you have the strawberries already and you have the plums, but you could give them up, sell them. But you do not yet have the cherries, but equally you could buy them. Of course, changing the budget, this can be equivalent situations, just changing the frame of what is the default. This might have a different effect in joint or separate presentation choices. In our actual experiment, we'll be doing this for time and risk choices rather than fruits, which allows us to also study the interaction of time and risk preferences. Am I more patient or impatient if the future is more risky, for example? Here, as I said, we study default and order effects, and we are especially interested in whether these default and order effects vary with the way the choices are presented, where we do not just mean joint or separate, but actually look at 4 different types of presenting, namely choices over final allocations, jointly, separately, or separately, but then without knowing what further choices you'll be facing in the future. We find, I believe, some interesting results, both on the interaction between risk and type preferences, differences in framing effects for time and risk preferences, and an effect of the way choices are presented on default and order effects. If you want to know more about this, please come to my poster presentation at the conference on August 20th. Looking forward to seeing you there.